Hey guys, welcome back. Tisha here, back with another chapter reading of Lost Boys by Brent W. Jeffs with Mia Salovich. Go ahead and do me a favor and hit the like button as we jump into part 3. After we're starting with chapter 14, Short Creek. It was hard to believe that my parents were leaving the church, that they'd been transformed literally overnight into the worst kind of people. The apostates that church leaders always described as filthy and low and living like animals. But there it was, plain as the welded gate at the end of our yard. Church members, even my close cousins, now wouldn't make eye contact or speak to us when we passed. I wondered what would happen to us, whether Dad would have to choose just one wife. I didn't know if I could handle any more conflict. The thought of being cast out weighed heavily on me. Just before Cheyenne's funeral, I had become a deacon. I was sealed into the church with a solemn ceremony that most boys chose to undergo around age 14. At that time, if you feel you are ready, you ask your father if he thinks you are mature enough to enter into the priesthood. Now, we've heard this whole priesthood thing on other shows. The priesthood is specifically towards males. You don't hear women being able to do this, just males. So it's interesting that at age 14, they feel like that's old enough. It means a lot because it marks your transition into the adult world and your entry into a brotherhood that has transmitted holy authority from prophet to prophet, going all the way back to Jesus Christ himself. According to our church, men in the priesthood are the only people in the world who can receive revelations directly from God. Only men. This cult makes sure that no matter what, that guys always seem to be at the top of everything and women are subservient to these males. So here you have, yet again, it being said, this is something that's just for us men. You ladies, nah, this isn't something that you all get. This ability is passed through lineage. When I told Dad I thought I was ready for this honor, he agreed. And as is traditional, he sought the prophet's approval. With that granted, I had attained the first level of the priesthood in the one true church. In the ceremony, as the men of the church placed their hands on my head and prayed, I was given the first set of symbolic keys to my salvation. I was no longer a boy in the eyes of God and the church. In fact, in our theology, I now had more decision-making power than any woman, even my mom. So at 14, he believes that he has more power than his mother, all because he's a guy and because he entered this priesthood. If I rejected this legacy, I would be doing it as an adult, turning my back on everything I had been taught to believe throughout my childhood. I was in shock and didn't know if I wanted to relinquish my birthright. I felt extremely guilty. I didn't want to live in hell for all eternity. My brother Aaron had also decided to stay. He was living with our Uncle David. My parents said they would support whatever decision I made. I could see that my mom was sad, but I didn't know what else to do. They are so ingrained in this that they fear what will happen if they don't follow what they've been taught. Yet the best thing for them to have done would probably have been for them to go with their parents. So when my friend Richie said I could live with him down in Colorado City, I decided to try it. I visited him and his family many times there before. He wanted to help me keep my priesthood. He didn't want me to leave the community. His father, Howard, would be my priesthood head, the role usually played by your own father. With some 27 kids, Howard didn't think one more would be a problem. I could live with their family in good standing as a member of the FLDS. Maybe there I'd learn to be obedient and keep sweet and live up to the royal blood that supposedly ran in my veins. I packed some clothes. Dad gave me a used red Yamaha River scooter for transportation while I was there. I hitched a ride into a semi-trailer owned by some church members who had a shipping company. semi-trailer. I hadn't spent a great deal of time in Colorado City, but the memories I had of it were good. When I was about 8, we visited for the Harvest Festival, a celebration led by the prophet that expressed gratitude for the crops raised on nearby farms. Before I continue, Dad, Mom, and baby Brett is up top, and then him as an infant with his mom. So that's his father, his mother, and baby Brent, and that's his mom and him. The residents set up stalls selling homemade donut. Oh, it's more pictures. Wait. Oh. Holes and other goodies and trinkets like little hand-carved wooden bears. Everyone was having a good time. There were lots of things for us kids to do. Okay, let me show y'all these pictures. That was a weird place to put them. Next is Mom and me when I had chicken pox. And then my little brother and me in our hallway bedroom, the one that he told us about. Oh, you can see a little chicken pox. These kids these days will never know what it was to have chicken pox. I remember having chicken pox. Remember it well. Next page, with one of my sisters on Easter, and then one child from each of my moms. I'm in between my two sisters. You can't really see the siblings, but you could see him. And then that's him right there in between his sisters. Cute kids. Then we have Mom, Dad, and most of us kids near the compound. It's a local tradition. Then it's going to be all of the boys in my family know how to feed and change infants. I'm the one on the right. Pardon all the noise outside. It's nice outside, and these kids are playing. Next is the men of the family on Sunday before church. And then some of my best childhood memories involve fishing trips my father took us on. I caught a pretty big one here. Then it's Cheyenne's funeral at the top, Clayton and his daughter in the middle, and then him shortly after he met Jody. Oh, he's jumping stuff here. I hate when they do that, but we just gonna go with it. That's him after he shortly met Jody. I get to kiss the bride, and then Helly loves to get her picture taken. Here is him, his wife, and his baby. So him and his bride. Now you done gave away some of the story just showing us that. I hate when they do that. Like, put the pictures at the back or something, or right after you talk about that part. But that's just me not wanting to be spoiled. So this is, top is Warren Jeffs holding and kissing a young girl. Bottom is Warren Jeffs reacts as the verdict of guilty is read while he stands with his defense attorneys in the 5th District Court on September 25th, 2007. It's so crazy that wasn't that long ago. So him and some of the young wives, and then him with his many attorneys who should be ashamed of themselves for all trying to defend that man. I'm just saying. All right. Let me read that last sentence over again. The residents set up stalls selling homemade donut holes and other goodies and trinkets like hand-carved wooden bears. Everyone was having a good time, and there were lots of things for us kids to do. There was a little train to ride on and a park and lots of booths with games to play. It was the kind of family celebration that brought out the best in the church, that allowed us to be together and enjoy one another rather than focusing on all the thou shalt nots. D. Jessup had set up his zoo there, and they had ostriches and elephants and a bear and all kinds of other animals that made a big impression on a little kid. The landscape is dramatic with the towering Vermilion cliffs and wide open majestic sky. It's the kind of place that can't help inspiring religious thought because man seems so small in the face of nature. Another geographical fact about the place played a more practical part in our faith. The state line between Arizona and Utah bisects the town. The Arizona side is called Colorado City. The Utah side is called Hydel. We still call it by its old name, Short Creek, or just the Creek, but the border has often helped the FLDS in its long-running battle with law enforcement over polygamy. State officials have no authority outside the lines of their state, and it has often been hard for either Arizona or Utah to prove that a crime like polygamy or underage marriage actually took place in its jurisdiction. According to one history of the FLDS, the location wasn't chosen for that reason. The twin towns supposedly grew because that's where the founders of our church owned land. The border sure was convenient, though. I think Richie's family lived on the Arizona side. No one really paid much attention to the border. That makes me think about the Browns, wondering if that's part of the reason why they were in Arizona. But that's just, because I don't think that this is anywhere near where they stay, but it's just a thought. Howard had 2 wives. Richie's mom alone had 19 kids. Poor lady. And her sister wife, who lived in a separate building on the same land, had over a dozen. I could not imagine pushing out that many children. Ugh, she's a strong woman. So is her sister wife, having over a dozen. Because my one, whoo. For some reason, this separate living arrangement was tolerated. Consistency is not one of the FLDS strong points. With all his mother's kids, Richie's house was a jumble of random and oddly constructed additions. In the one where I stayed, you had to climb through a window from the main house to access the addition from within because they hadn't even built a door. The addition was large enough to be divided into maybe 30 bedrooms, but it was completely unfinished. In fact, the window into the addition was usually kept closed because the place had no heat or electricity. Oh my hell, did I freeze down there some winter nights. Even the main house didn't have central heating, so we stayed around the fireplace in the living room till it was time to sleep and freeze in the coldness of the addition, with only small electrical heaters for warmth. It's so, the things that these kids are going through. These had to be used with long extension cords from the main house, which is dangerous. Richie's father, Howard, was a character. He wasn't like other FLDS men because he didn't take himself seriously. He was a jokester who made light of everything. One time, he put crazy glue on one of his son's bike seats, leaving the boy with the choice of taking his pants off or staying a long time on that little bike. Another time, he sprayed black ink on a black phone in the house, so everyone who tried to talk on it wound up with a black circle around one ear. This is the father? He didn't have great social skills, so he'd often seem clumsy and weird. But he was respected because he was incredibly smart and could fix anything from washers and dryers to cars, radios, and vacuum cleaners. Richie seems to have inherited both his father's sharp brain and some of his unusual attitudes. When I arrived, Howard convened a family meeting to introduce me to everyone and then said a prayer to welcome me. Richie's brothers helped me take my stuff into the room I'd be sharing with him, and everyone was really nice. It was a relief because I wasn't used to being away from my family for long. Since I didn't have any money, I got a job shortly after I moved down there. Alta Academy had closed, and Warren told everyone to homeschool their kids. But what really happened for a lot of teenage boys was that they dropped out and worked. At times, in FLDS history, young men were assigned a work mission in which they'd labor for the church for a year or two, helping build houses and other buildings needed by the community. The boys were often called when they were just out of high school, but it could happen earlier. I worked at an auto body shop run by some members of the Barlow family. We rebuilt tractors. I later learned that this was illegal child labor. I was doing sandblasting and working with dangerous equipment that a kid my age shouldn't have even been allowed near. I used a machine that sprays beads of sand all over the car or tractor. It peels the paint right off. It could also take your hand off if you weren't careful. But it paid for gas for my scooter and it kept me busy. And I didn't have to think about my future, which was helpful because I had no idea what to do next with my life or with anything really. Now that I was a deacon, I had to attend priesthood meetings every Saturday night at the Leroy S. Johnson Meeting Hall. The low, pale yellow building looked more like a warehouse than a church, but it was huge, if partially unfinished. Many houses in Short Creek were similarly incomplete, even shoddy looking. Some say this is done to make people look poor for tax and welfare purposes. Others say it's because of the variable availability of cash and labor to complete building projects by getting on the schedule for help on Saturday, work days, or from work missions. Either way, the towns look run down and haphazard. Priesthood meetings were held in the main meeting room, the same place as services. All the men of the community would gather there to testify and pray, talk about the priesthood role they held and their gratitude to be a part of the church. So it seems like all their church consists of is testimony and more testimony and getting lectured to and testimony and another lecture and testimony. I would be bored of it. They would first split into groups distinguished by their hierarchy in the church. As the lowest ranking, the deacons were in the back, and the highest, the apostles and the prophets, sat on the podium. My grandfather would open the meeting with a few words about being the prophet. He was sickly and required oxygen by this point, so he wouldn't say much more than, I am the prophet, and I know this church is true, and I am thankful that all of you are here to adhere to all these teachings and take them home with you and share them with your families. Today I have my representative talk for me. Here's Warren Jeffs. Warren was then the first counselor, the highest of the apostles, which is the rank below prophet. He would express his gratitude for having that role in the one true church and then drone on as usual about perfect obedience. He talked about how we should set an example for the younger kids by coming to priesthood meetings, giving our full tithe, and working hard on the Saturday work days. He go on about how we needed to follow in the footsteps of the holy men higher in the church. About once a month, he'd lecture about the sin of masturbation and how we shouldn't defile our body's temple. It's like, bro, like you can do all these things, but they can't. It's crazy to me. It's crazy to me. It just makes absolutely no sense, but whatever. Like our church services, these meetings were extremely repetitive, stressing over and over the need for us to do as we were told so we could live the principle and gain the highest realms of heaven. It would get on my nerves. It would. Soon, a holder of, I'm going to jack this up, the Melchizedek, Melchizdek, priesthood, the rank you needed to get married, would testify. Same deal. Gratitude for having attained this priesthood and emphasis on the true nature of the church. Men would often share experiences that they believe show God working in their lives. For instance, a guy would speak about nearly losing a hand to farm equipment or being able to rapidly get out from under a car when a jack had fallen, and they say, I know that happened because I hold a key to this church and I have the power to communicate with God and he protects me and I know that the church is true. Oh, so if a woman were to be in the same situation, she wouldn't be protected. It just doesn't make sense. I struggle with some of this stuff because I know that it's something that they're taught from very early on, but goodness gracious. After everyone who felt moved had testified, Warren would close the meeting with a prayer, thanking God for all of our blessings and imploring him to help us take what we learned to heart. Then came the most important part of the meeting, at least as far as Warren was concerned, the collection of tithes. Everyone had to tithe at least 10% of their income, and we would put the money in an envelope and turn it over to grandfather on our way out. Sometimes those seeking favor would arrange a special meeting with grandfather to tithe. They bring their sons to try to show them off to grandfather, to have them noticed as upstanding church members so that they could eventually get wives. Often, grandfather was too ill to collect the money, so Warren would do it himself. It just is everything is transaction after transaction. If I give you more money and I show you these kids, then maybe you'll let them get married. The first couple of times I went to the priesthood meetings, I felt welcomed. I was a man now. I was going to learn to play my part. I tried to pay attention and take heed. I thought Howard would be my priesthood head, but apparently Warren wanted to keep close tabs on me, so I was assigned to report to someone higher in the church. Of course he wanted to keep close tabs on you, because at his core, he's still trying to cause conflict, and he's a perv. Reporting in was one of the many ways the church leadership monitored the members. Once a month, every man would report on his life and his sins to his priesthood head. Nothing was off limits. Why am I supposed to have that conversation with you? If I believe in the Heavenly Father, whoever they think their Heavenly Father is, I should be reporting that stuff to the Heavenly Father, no? Why am I telling this so-called, I don't know. And I'm not trying to offend anyone, because I understand that, I don't know a whole bunch about Catholic, but I know in the Catholic Church that sometimes you have confession with your priest. I just feel like for me, that's not necessary. For me, I'm going to talk to Heavenly Father himself. My thoughts, it's okay if we don't agree. You had to tell everything, whether you smoked a cigarette or jerked off, or if you had talked to a girl. If you did something wrong, you could expect to be lectured about it. You knew that it would filter up to Warren if it was bad enough. Women and girls didn't have to do this, but their husbands or fathers were expected to keep them in line and report any major disobedience or failure in keeping sweet. This kept Warren and his henchmen on top of all the gossip and gave them material to use against you if they wanted to leverage to keep you in check. Here's the thing. If he's supposed to be the prophet, shouldn't he know these things without it being told to him? Shouldn't he know these things without you having to confess to him or have other guys telling him? But he's not. He just wants to know what's what so he can use it against you. That's all it's for. Of course, I didn't realize this back then. I thought it was just a part of my religion, and I wanted so badly to be good and to do the right thing. Most of us did, and that was yet another thing they had on us. If you hold the keys to a man's salvation, it's very easy to manipulate him. So sad. I was also so wrenched from what had happened with my family that I wanted something solid to hold on to. So I was trying to keep sweet in my new life in Colorado City. I was working, I was going to church on Sundays, participating in Saturday work days, and trying to stick to the straight and narrow. As best a 14-year-old boy could, I was trying to be a responsible and reliable person. But within a few weeks, I found myself messing up. The other men and their sons had learned by then who I was and what had happened to my family, which is part of the problem, because y'all run your mouth so much, y'all gossip so much, that rather than focusing on yourselves, you're sitting here and you're telling all these stories about this young man, and you probably have some preconceived notions about him, which is going to make it even harder for him to get acclimated. Rumors and gossip spread rapidly in the community. When I walked into the next priesthood meeting, no one would initiate a conversation with me. They kept to the little groups they were standing in, and some even pointed and stared. I tried to say something to someone, but it was as though I was a stranger who walked in the wrong saloon in the Old West. So y'all are now treating him poorly, even though he was told that he could stay if he want to and be led by another priesthood holder, when he probably, as I said before, would have been better off going with his father away from all of this mess. But because he's been brainwashed from such an early age, he thinks that he's supposed to stay here and endure. I soon got this kind of treatment on the street and in church as well, from everyone but Richie and his family, even the other kids, if any adult was watching. They were afraid of being judged. It wasn't enough that I was trying. That didn't matter. I was still my father's son, and Dad was now an apostate. My father's sins had been visited on me, and no one but Richie's family would give me a break. The unfairness started to make me bitter. People were judging me for something I had nothing to do with and could do nothing about. I also think there was some long-standing resentment of the Jeffs that was being projected onto me. For most of the history of the FLDS, the Jeffs had lived in Salt Lake and did not keep a close watch on the Short Creek. Other families were more powerful there, but now Rulon Jeffs was the prophet, and he and his ambitious son Warren seemed to be moving their base of operation to the border towns, or at least spending a lot more time there and building large homes for themselves. People in Short Creek had always had some suspicion of us city folk, and people in Salt Lake tended to see those who lived in Short Creek as hicks. So I think this was another reason I was being excluded. There was also temptation everywhere. Like most teenagers, I was obsessed with love and sex. I'd been an early bloomer, writing notes to a girl named Danica when I was in the 3rd grade. She never wrote back, but it didn't stop me, and I can still remember her big blue eyes. I think I wrote, "I like you, and will you play with me?" I got in trouble, of course. Though we'd been taught to treat girls like snakes, even Warren's best brainwashing couldn't conquer human nature. When I first arrived, Richie had introduced me to his friends. One day we were walking in town, just hanging around looking for something to do. I saw a beautiful girl walking by, and it turned out that he knew her. Like my 3rd grade crush, she was also blonde-haired and blue-eyed. Something about her just melted me. Her hair was long and straight, and her skin was smooth, her features almost perfectly symmetrical. I introduced myself and told her I just moved in. Unlike the adults of the community, she welcomed me. She told me her name was Lisa. I was usually really shy, but somehow I got the courage to tell her that I thought she was pretty and asked her to meet me that night at 10 out by the creek. Uh-oh. I was deliriously happy when she said yes. Meeting at that time posed a risk. There was a 10 p.m. curfew for everyone in the community, and the local police, who were all members of the church, would patrol the streets looking for violators, especially teenagers. They acted under Warren's directives. If they caught you, they would lecture you, bring you home immediately, and wake the man of the house. Then most kids would be in serious trouble, risking a beating or grounding or worse. I bought a single red long-stem rose from the market in Short Creek, which was owned by church members. I plan to tell anyone who saw me with it and ask what it was for, a sick relative or for one of Richie's moms. I had butterflies in my stomach as I watched for her under the moonlit sky. Although Short Creek ran through the center of town, its banks were sheltered by large maples, cottonwoods, junipers, and tall leafy trees, in many places by dense underbrush. Some of the cottonwoods were 80 feet tall and had massive trunks. It was wild, hidden, and beautiful down there, away from prying eyes. The creek bed itself was pretty much dry, with an occasional trickle of stream after a downpour, but it was certainly a spot where people could go if they wanted real privacy. Then I saw her. We greeted each other, and I gave her the rose and a love note I'd written, saying that she was cute and made me feel good. I spread a blanket for us so we wouldn't have to sit on the bare ground. A huge smile lit up her face as she took the rose and read the note. For a while we just talked. Oh boy, they're going to get in trouble. Soon I got up the nerve to put my arm around her and we cuddled. Then magically she turned, looked into my eyes, and kissed me. She initiated it. I was blown away. I'd never felt like that with anyone before. We made out for hours before we reluctantly decided that we had better sneak back home. After that, we met there as often as we could, sometimes every night. Within a few weeks, Richie and Lisa's sister also started sneaking out to the creek with us, but her sister and Richie mostly just talked. My scooter and the $8 an hour I was getting at the body shop also gave me a taste of freedom. I would drive 3 miles to get a gas station called I would drive 3 miles to a gas station called Canna's Corner, which wasn't run by people in the church. I'd slip the attendant an extra $10 to sell beer, oh Lord, and cigarettes without IDing me, and I'd be the coolest kid in the creek, smuggling these forbidden items to our secret hideout. Somehow, Colorado City wasn't taming me. So he took his extra money to get alcoholic beverages when he's probably like 14 or 15 at this time, and he got them. Oh, this is not going to be good. Although the mainstream Mormon church forbids use of all intoxicants, the FLDS has sometimes turned a blind eye to alcohol. We had alcohol in our house growing up, and the prophet even had a hidden wine cellar. I can't imagine Warren didn't sneak a few drinks from time to time. In fact, Dad says he heard about at least one time when Warren and some of his brothers in their teens got completely wrecked. I know for sure that my grandfather drank. In fact, I could probably call him an alcoholic. He always had at hand a big glass with a lot of clear liquor in it. My dad later told me it was vodka. Lots of men and women in the church seemed to keep sweet with a hand from Jack Daniels. I'd gotten drunk for the first time on peach schnapps that my brother Dave had stolen from my parents when I was around 13. He gave it to Nathan, and Nathan and I downed the whole bottle, and soon we had the spins and we were throwing up all over the place. Dave, who was much older and had moved away and then back home briefly, was laughing his ass off at us. I started smoking cigarettes with Richie, who thought it was cool. Though I liked how it looked to smoke, I never really got addicted. In fact, the next year, I had some sort of allergic reaction to cigarettes that put me in the hospital for 5 days. After that, I didn't smoke cigarettes again. But down in the creek, I did, wanting to look cool in front of my new girlfriend. Yeah, the smoking thing was never my thing. Now, I had my first drink when I was 18. And it was a sky blue wine cooler. It was my first night away at college, and I wasted no time to try it, but I didn't get drunk or whatever. I just, that was my first drink. The things we remember. Lisa didn't smoke, but she would drink beer with me. I understood by then how alcohol could take the edge off, and it helped me be less shy and open up with her. In fact, Richie and I began to throw parties that made us hugely popular with the other kids. This isn't going to be good. Like, at some point, you're going to get caught doing this. They started shortly after I arrived, but we were too scared to do it more than 3 or 4 times. We found a spot up in the mountains that was perfect. However, many of the people in Colorado City kept horses. One of our neighbors had about a dozen of them. After work, Richie and I had an arrangement with these neighbors. We helped clean and feed the horses, and in return, we were allowed to ride whenever we liked. I'd never been on a horse before, but I slipped into the saddle the first time and took it pretty naturally. We discovered a horse trail that led up into the mountains and behind one of our neighbors' houses, and that's where we threw our first party. I spent my whole paycheck, $150 worth of beer. It took me 6 trips on the scooter to Canna's Corner and back to carry all of it. He did all this stuff and wasn't getting caught? Interesting. I still don't now know how I didn't get caught. I spoke that up. I was 14 and driving a scooter filled with beer back into town, but I did it. And then we used someone's red radio flyer metal wagon. Okay, let me reread it. And then we used someone's red radio flyer metal wagon to get the beer up the mountain. Earlier that day, Richie and I had ridden our horses up the mountain to scout the best place to make a bonfire. The Red Rock Mountains had plenty of boulders and cliffs that could hide our activity from those in town who might look up there. We made sure our spot was secluded and then dug a pit and placed stones in it, like I'd seen my dad do at home. We told our friends and they told theirs, and that night we had 40 kids up in the mountains drinking and partying. All of these kids are FLDS kids that are under strict, tight reign, who have to answer to this prophet, who are supposed to keep sweet, who can't watch TV, who can't do all these things. Yet here they are in the mountains drinking and partying. Just goes to show you that people will find a way. I sold the beer at a small markup to earn back my paycheck. No one minded paying, and we sat under the starry sky, poking at the fire, trying to make sense of the universe. But unlike other teenagers, we were faced with an unusually baffling set of practices and paradoxes. We had been told the end was near, but was it? We wanted something more than this life of dread and preparation, but we didn't know what. Everyone got drunk. When Richie and I decided to go home at about around 2 in the morning, there were about half a dozen kids passed out on the ground. We had to leave them to fend for themselves. This is just a great way to get busted. Like, have all these kids that snuck out of the house after the 10 p.m. curfew, and they're laid out on the ground, and when the people wake up in the morning, the kids aren't home. But I don't think that's going to happen. I'm just saying. Lisa came to the party, of course, but she didn't want to fool around that night. She wanted oblivion. Like me, she had problems with her family that weighed on her. When she wasn't thinking about those issues, she was bubbly and funny, making everyone laugh. But that night, she wasn't her usual effervescent self. As we drank, she told me more and more about what was going on. She said that her relationship with her father was bad and getting worse. The constant fighting made her miserable. I tried to make it better, but I didn't think there was anything that I could do to really help her. And we're going to end here. Ooh-wee, y'all. I think it's about to pick up. We shall see. Let me know what you thought about this chapter. Until next time.